to hear fully. That's tough. It's a little loud back there, but at least the speaker's not on right now for all the different people that are signing.
All right, what is going on, everybody? So, super excited to be here today. If you don't know me, I am Greg. My channel is Midlife Sports Cards, and I've got two really great people with me today. I've got Orlando from A Collector's Dream and Ryan from Breakout Cards. How you doing, guys?
Great.
Not too bad.
So Ryan is stuck in Chantilly at the card show. He had some flight travel issues, so he is actually at the show right now. So maybe if you want to buy something, you can send Ryan a message. But first off, I actually have a newer channel. My channel started in October, and one of the reasons that I decided to do this whole YouTube thing is to connect with other collectors, to connect with collectors from all over the country. And I've really tried to surround myself and get to know other guys, and it's been awesome. And two of the people that I really have respected from afar for a long time is Orlando and Ryan. I've been a huge fan of Ryan's channel for a long time. I've had people ask me for a long time, what's your favorite channel? And I always say Breakout Cards. And I'm
That's
not
right.
just saying that because you're here, Ryan. That's the truth. I've watched you for a long time. Orlando, I look at is like he's sort of like everybody's favorite uncle. Like he's always there. He's always commenting. He always makes you feel good. It's like two of the greatest guys. So super excited to have you guys here. So for those of us out there that don't really know you guys, Orlando, why don't you kind of introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your channel?
Okay. Ryan's channel is my favorite channel, by the way. But my name's Orlando. My channel is A Collector's Dream, and basically my channel is just about showing my collection. I've been a collector for over 50 years. I went through a lot of stages, from set collector to player collector, and I was a dealer for about 10 years, doing mall shows and things like that. And really, I just kind of started YouTube beginning of last year because of a bunch of issues, but I really wanted to get back into my cards. A lot of them were locked up in the safe due to COVID or in the bank and all that. And anyway, I just decided, hey, I'm going to pull it out, look at my cards, and I'm going to videotape them because I saw a lot of YouTubers would just say, just put the camera out there and just videotape. So that's what I started doing. And little by little, I just, got into it and started showing my collection, and everybody started commenting, and it was just awesome. The community is really, really, jumped on the bandwagon and helped me so much. And Ryan was the first one that helped me the most. And I got to tell you, he was the first Uber that I met at the National. We had set up a deal that we were going to meet and do a trade over there. And, when I got there, it was just awesome. It was great. And then we did the deal, and he put me on his channel there, and I tell you, I went with about 200 subscribers, and I came out of the national with like 500 subscribers, and part of it was Ryan and everybody else in the community to help me also.
The power of Breakout Cards, right?
Yes, it was huge.
So, Ryan, I know a lot of us know you, but for those of us that might be new, tell us a little bit about your channel and how it got started and what kind of stuff you do.
Sure. So I'll kind of tell you the history of Breakout Cards. It was actually started by me and one of my really good friends at college, Steven. So we were both in the UCF running club, and there's not many card collectors college age, and both enjoyed it. We decided we're going to make a YouTube channel, and some of the first videos, funny enough, were his point of view for card show vlogs instead of myself. And I think over time, I ended up deciding I'll be doing the vlogs and did some other stuff like behind the scenes, things like that. But last 3 years have been pretty much card shows all the time. For 2 years, I went to a card show almost every weekend, 50 plus shows 2 years in a row. This year, I'm slowing it down, only doing about 20 shows or so. But it's still tough, obviously, traveling because you do get quite a few plane delays, so you get other stuff that happens. But it's fun with that. And then I also used to do a lot of videos on like fake sports cards and different things like that. Just don't have the time anymore about it, but there's tons of resources on there if you want to learn how to spot fake cards and different things like that. And occasionally I'll have different videos also where I have different collectors on the channel. Orlando was already there, kind of showing off their PCs and help educating people. To get a little bit more time, I'm going to continue that series, but just it's been kind of a struggle building out enough time to create content recently.
And a couple things too I want to add in. Ryan wrote a book about spotting fakes, and if you run into him at a show, he usually has some on him and he'll sign those, and but it's available on Amazon. So if you're interested in checking out his book, it's called Spotting Fakes, correct?
That is correct. It's on Amazon, and I do bring like 1 or 2 copies to a show.
And then you also this year, correct me if I'm wrong, started a second YouTube channel, correct?
Yeah, but that's for like my personal life on development and coding and stuff like that. So
Sure.
I'm kind of like a mixture between data analytics and data science, and I work in under risk for a fintech. So what I'm trying to do is kind of build out my portfolio and kind of show new skill sets for that channel.
Very cool. I know you've been training for some half marathons and stuff and marathons, and he goes to concerts. I mean, when Orlando says that Ryan's like the busiest guy out there, he's up there. Just wait till he has a newborn someday, then he'll really know busy.
I was kind of sad I couldn't do my long run today because I didn't bring any extra clothes. I was supposed to train 50 miles coming up in about a month, middle of summer Florida heat. So 50 miles, if people aren't familiar, is 2 marathons. You run them back to back. So I used to do a lot of ultra running before doing sports card content. I kind of delayed a little bit. I got fat from traveling all the time. So I cut back traveling every weekend, focus on fixing my diet and getting back into running shape. So 50-mile in a month, and then be working on 100K and 100-miler.
Wow.
This year or early next year.
That's awesome. So, a couple things I want to point out before we move on. Again, if you're just joining us, Ryan is actually at the Chantilly Card Show right now because his plane flight last night got canceled. So the reason he doesn't have headphones or things like that is because he's literally at one of the biggest shows in the country right now. And then, the other thing I want to point out is you'll see at the bottom of your screen scrolling across. We're doing a fundraiser. We're trying to raise money for Signatures for Soldiers, which is a group that tries to raise money to provide signature opportunities, sports signature opportunities for veterans and soldiers. And so if you would consider making a contribution to that, the PayPal information to Mike Moynihan's account is down there with the information. So I did mine earlier, and I would encourage you to do that if you haven't. Now, the other thing that I wanted to talk to you guys about is, one of the questions I get a lot is like, how do you approach a show? Like, what's your game plan? How do you come up with a game plan? Like when you walk in the room, what do you do? What do you do before the show? And I know you both are going to the National, which is in Chicago this year. What, Orlando, is kind of your game plan for the National? Because the amount of tables is so enormous. It's like where do you even start? And can you hit every table? So what's sort of like your game plan to someone who might be attending the show for the first time?
Well, I definitely try to hit every table, especially every vintage table. And what I try to do is I no longer am a set collector, but when I was a set collector, I always had a list with me of everything I needed, but now I've kind of evolved into more of, and I did my player collecting run with my mantle and all that. So now I really look for stuff that I don't see at other shows. I'm not really going there with a specific list, but I have certain things I'm always looking for. I'm always looking for some Goodwin champions. I'm always looking for some older, 19th century cards. But I really try to find things that are unique that I don't find. Like similar to, Ryan found a Satchel Paige Pittsburgh exhibit card. Those kind of things you don't see. That's the kind of stuff I look for at the National. If I find something like that, I'll pick something like that up. My problem this year is that I bought a huge PC card. I got an 1887 old Judge King Kelly, the $10,000 Kelly, the portrait version of that. And that was a card that I was going to look for at the National. And since I got it, my funds are down. So basically what I'm going to do now at the National, I'm going to take some cards to sell or trade. I still am looking for cards. I'll show you some of the stuff. I look for Cuban cards, and these. You know, and I also look for Cuban players. You know, like Minoso. If I can find one like this autograph, this card I got last year at the National, and I just had it slabbed. So I look for Cuban players, cards from Cuba, specific some things from the 19th century that maybe you don't see every day. Um, you know, stuff like that is what I'm looking for.
Now, just to follow up on that, Orlando, because you live in Florida, so do you tend to see more of that stuff in Florida than you would in other parts of the country, or is it just kind of the same?
Well, you do see a lot of the Cuban cards in Florida because a lot of people that came from Cuba, if they were able to get the cards out of Cuba, they brought them here. And there is still one guy in Cuba that is the biggest collector out there, uh, Rolando. But there are a lot of Cuban card collectors here. There's Victor Pina, which I guess Ryan knows also. He has tons of stuff. And there are, believe it or not, in South Florida, there's a lot of big collectors down here. You know, a lot of them come from up north, but especially for Cuban cards and things like that, you'll see some of that down here more often.
Now, if I remember correctly, you got a mini Minoso Topps rookie at the National last year. Is that correct?
No, what I got last year was this Mini Minoso
The
53
53. Okay.
autograph. Yeah, I got it autographed.
Didn't you get a 52 Topps Minoso recently?
Yes, I do have. I did get a 52 Topps Spinoso earlier this year. I sure did.
But that wasn't at the National.
No, that was not at the
Uh,
National. What I
okay.
got last year at the National was I got a Cap Anson 1895 Mayo Cup plug Cap Anson. That was my big purchase last year at the National.
So Ryan, I know that you've got a really diverse kind of collecting repertoire. So how do you approach the show? Do you have certain dealers that you're looking to go straight to, or is it kind of like, you're just going to try to hit every vintage table? What's your plan?
So, I mean, honestly, I haven't even really solidified my plan, but for me, like, there's two approaches to the National. First, like, trying to find unique stuff, because you will find dealers at the National that have test issue cards or rare regional or foreign releases that you aren't going to see at most card shows. So if you're looking for like specific oddball stuff that doesn't populate online, even very rarely at auction houses, you probably want to look for that stuff first, because all it takes is one other collector to grab it, and you're not going to find that card for 5 years or so. So like, definitely go with that approach first. And then the second side of things is they'll go to dealers that I've bought from a lot. So I know a lot of the different national dealers that do vintage. I kind of know what stuff they bring. So I'll go over there. Some of it I keep for myself. Some of it I'll end up selling, because the national is expensive. Like, there's a lot of costs associated with between flights, hotels, and also the time that you are at the show. So you do have to make a little bit of your money back on that side of things. So I'll be doing that as well. But just like, it's an experience as well. You got to enjoy it, see things around the city, go to different events, hang out with people, because it is the one event that everyone is able to go to. So you can hang out with some of your card friends that you see every few months or every year at the National. And that's kind of my approach to it. I don't have anything solidified, but I'm just try to find rare stuff first and find some cards to buy, sell, and trade.
For sure. And now your kind of collecting habits, like your PC habits, have changed a little bit over the last year or so, haven't they? And like Ryan, and what are you collecting right now? Like, what are you going after?
Yeah, my PC has changed quite a bit over the last few years. So like, growing up, I always was like very vintage heavy. I did collect a little bit of modern. So like, my modern PCs were Mike Stanton, who is Giancarlo Stanton now. Bought the wrong Mike, right? Mike will be better next year, but not a big deal. He's a good player still. And then also I got a lot into like Manny Machado, some Kershaw and Verlander, different things like that. But really, mainly like 50s through 70s, baseball was kind of like the bread and butter of PC. And then I started building out YouTube content, kind of really discovered love for like pre-war cards and different things like that. And from like pre-war cards, I discovered like the non-sports pre-war side of things. And honestly, like, I've been pivoting my collection a lot more towards that side of things, like historical figures or music cards, bands, different things like that. Like, first off, you can't find them at the show, so like there's a lot of hunt elements of it, because a lot of the type of stuff was released overseas or it's from the 1800s, and they just aren't sold all the time. So you have to network with those collectors, which you learn quite a bit about those specific cards, and also like finding them. I mean, I even went over to the United Kingdom this year for a card show, just to find cards, and I mean, I would have never thought in a million years that I was going to go over to the United Kingdom for a card show, right? Like, it's a fun hobby. I grew up going to card shows and flea markets in Florida with fans going on. They even have AC, and there's like maybe 30 dealers, right? There was no like slabs everywhere. Had raw cards, a lot of cheap vintage and different things like that. I grew up on that. So to go to like overseas for a show to hunt things for your collection is so freaking cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. And it's funny you mentioned that because I went to two shows yesterday. I live in Northern California and is in the Bay Area. And at the second show, there was maybe 20 dealers, but one of the guys moved here from Northern Ireland and grew up collecting tobacco cards. So he had a whole bunch of his tobacco stuff from like, the UK and Europe and stuff that like you normally don't see. And I sat there for like 45 minutes just talking to this guy, like learning from him and listening to him and looking at his stuff that you never see. And so when you guys point out like finding those dealers that do have the stuff you don't usually see at a big show like the National, you might find them at the National, but you might find them at your local card show, which is really crazy. It's really kind of nuts what you'll run into. The other reason I thought it would be really cool to have you guys on here with me is that, we're kind of like three different generations. It's
Yeah.
Ryan's the youngest, and then I'm kind of in the middle, and then there's Orlando. Yet we all kind of gravitate toward older stuff, pre-war stuff, kind of. And a lot of people keep saying, well, cards are going to die off. Like, no one's going to care about, you just mentioned Cap Ansem. Like, you think about some of these older guys that, like, we didn't get to see play, but you just still spent a lot of money, on his card. And so I think it's interesting that we have these three different generations right now talking, and we're all into stuff from like the early 1900s or 1800s, which I think is proof in itself that it's not going to just go away. But I'm going to go to you first, Ryan. I mean, why are you into early 1900 and 1800 cards and even non-sport cards? Like, what draws you to that? Like, what is it about those cards you think that has that now as your sweet spot of what you're interested in?
There's a few things. So like first is the history element of it. Like I really enjoy both within sports and also in general, like historical figures. Like, for example, a card that I picked up this weekend, there was one really prominent non-sports dealer here, and within his bargain bins, I was able to find an Alfred Nobel Ogden card. Now, people don't know Alfred Nobel. He was an inventor, but the Nobel Prize was named after him, right? And it's an Ogden. So if you're not familiar with Ogdens, they're a European release out of the United Kingdom. There's also Ogdens out of Sydney, Australia, which are tougher. Not to go into details with that, there's multiple different sets of Ogdens. There's like thousands upon thousands between different creations of different like poses and like whether it's a set, like they have like A through F, and then they have Guinea Golds. Like I could talk quite a bit about Ogden, but Nobel is kind of very tough to find because he's in a series that was only printed once, essentially. And I've been looking for that card for 3 years and find it in the bargain bin here, which is kind of incredible, right? Like you can find at card shows, and it's not an expensive card by any means, but like from that side of things, first I think the design school, right? The history of like Nobel prizes being introduced every single year to different people for their contributions of what they're able to do, whether in like science and technology or literature or whatever else on that side of things. And it's like the hunt. Like you can't always just buy something online. Like I like 70s baseball, but I could find a 68 Johnny Bench rookie card online if I wanted to, or any other card show. Like Topps Mansell. Like I get it's the grill of the hobby. Every large card show I see 5 at. And if you had the money to pony it up, people on Facebook groups or also on eBay have those cards plenty full available. You get into like non-sports, you get historical figures. or even a lot of the pre-war side of things, even some of the rare, tougher releases in baseball, like E111s or different caramels, like you can't always find those cards. Like it will take time to locate that for your own collection or whatever you do with that card.
I think something you just said about the hunt being part of it. I think that's so true. When there is something that you find and you're like, this is not something that I see very often. And one of the things I think about when I watch your channel as you're going flipping through stuff and you're buying stuff is I'm like, how does he have any idea what that's worth? Like is he just taking a flyer? Because you're
No,
you're
he
very
knows.
you're very knowledgeable. There's no doubt that you're very, very knowledgeable on all the different stuff. But how often do you buy something kind of blindly, not really knowing? Because I mean, even some of the stuff that you get or some of the stuff that you're talking about right now, which I think a lot of us think are really cool, is it's like, you know, how do you know that it's a good deal? Because you can't just get an eBay comp because, like you said, you can't find this stuff. So, how do you base it and know that you're getting a good deal?
So on some stuff, I still take a fly. Like I'll give you two examples of cards I took a fly on yesterday. So I bought a 1920s Spain card or Spanish card of Wilbur Wright, and I've never seen the card before. I tried looking up the specific brand, which I believe was distributed chocolate. There's no images online, but I saw the card was what 30 USD. So I figured whatever. Worst case scenario, amount $30. I knew it's a real card from the 1920s because there's many boxers that have similar designs on the cards on the very front back. Worst case scenario, it wasn't listed on trading card database. I couldn't find any information online. Is there the Boris Karloff, the original guy that played Frankenstein? Now, actor cards aren't too popular right now. It could change in the future, but Frankenstein's an iconic character, especially in the horror side of things. This card is out of Australia, and the only reason I know it's from Australia is I have a decent amount of knowledge on the cricket side of things, and that same brand that distributed those cards distributed some of the more expensive cricket cards. The Donald Bradmans through some of the licorice brands are very, very expensive, and I saw that card Boris Karloff, which was in 1939, and he has earlier stuff, but that was $40. And again, I figured, you know what, I'm probably not going to find this card, or if I do, it's going to take years, whatever. Like the worst case scenario amount is $40. And so that's just sometimes how you have to approach things. Like, will you overpay on stuff? Sure. But that's also part of the learning experience, because when you overpay, you learn, like, oh, this set is super common. And just to give you an example of it, when I was first getting into cricket cards, the best cricketer of all time is a guy named Donald Bradman. Now, at the time, his Ogdens, right, had like maybe 10 graded only. And I thought that was a really rare card. So I saw one pop up on eBay, and I spent like $400. And I'm telling you, like, this thing was a one. Like, imagine the piece of paper, you crumpled it up, you threw it on the ground, then you stepped on it a few times. like that was a one. And I spent 400 USD on it, right? Go to find out, that's a pretty common card of Donald Bradman, and that card in that shape should be like worth $100. Like, I way overpaid, but at the same time, right? You learn, like, oh, the Ogdens in 1928 were very common for cricketers. Probably about 500 to 1,000 of that card. There's other brands of Donald Bradman, like licorice brands, that are way tougher. You have also like Wills and a few other things out there. Like, those are the ones that you should be chasing, and not this specific copy. And you also have the collectors that say you spent $400, you're an idiot, but then teach you all the information because they actually know everything about the sport. But like, you will take losses, you will make mistakes, but that's part of the journey. Like, no one's gonna go out tomorrow, whether you like start a new PC, whether it's like music cards or cricket or boxing, and be an expert. Like, you have to make mistakes to become an expert in whatever you collect. And I'm just saying, like, in general, it's part of the process. Don't be so tied up on like, oh, did I get this card for a good deal? And over time, you get the intuition of whether something's a good deal or not, or whether you should pick up that card for that price or not.
I think you made some great points. I think the learning process is part of it, and I think that the fact that you've learned from some of your mistakes and you are so knowledgeable, anybody who's interested in pre-war stuff, go and watch Ryan's, all of his old card show videos for the last 2 years and just watch him do his deals. And not only are you learning how to bundle well, but you're also learning because he teaches about the cards as he's talking about them, because a lot of us don't know about cricket cards, but people might be interested in it. And so I really encourage you to do that. Orlando, let me turn to you. Now you kind of the same sort of question to, your take. Like, why do you think a lot of us young people are into pre-war, and why will it stand the test of time? Like, why won't it go away when the generation who was alive during those guys, you know, leave us?
Well, I mean, I share what happened to me. I started, of course, with the 70s, where I was first collecting, then went down to the 60s and 50s, and then I just started kind of learning more about history, more about baseball, and just went deeper and deeper and deeper into it. And I think that takes a little bit of time, and you watch Ken Burns shows, the documentaries, and you get to learn more about that, and you just keep kind of picking up a card here and there, and all of a sudden, you pick up somebody and you read about them, and it's so interesting. And it's just one of those things that the history is what really really draws me to those vintage cards. And like Ryan is saying, sometimes you don't have comps. There's cards sometimes you don't know it. And there was a time, I'll show, and Ryan knows this card very well.
Isaac Murphy.
Yeah. I traded him one of these. At one time I had 4 Isaac Murphy cards.
Wow.
And I was competing against myself because I was the last comp. Every time I go to a dealer or something, it was like, oh shit, that's the last one I bought. I'm comping myself over here on these cards, But sometimes that tends to happen, because when I see a card like that, when you go to a show, I don't see any Goodwin Champion cards. But when I see one that's decent, I'll pick it up, even if I have one. And Isaac Murphy, if you don't know Isaac Murphy, he is the greatest jockey pretty much ever. They still give out the Isaac Murphy Award. He's the only black athlete on that set, and he is a winningest jockey in the history of horse racing. So it's one of those things that once you learn history and you go back in time and you study people like John L. Sullivan and all those guys, it's just fascinating to me. Just reading the accounts of him fighting Corbett or Jack Johnson, all these fights and all these things, and just the things that happened during those days. It's just so interesting to me, and it just took me back to those days. And going back, the set that I collected the most after I sold off a lot of my stuff to go back, and I went back to collect, some of the cards that I really, of course, Babe Ruth and things like that. I had to sell off a lot of my collection for that, because I wanted to go back to pre-war. So I did, pick up. I'll show you, some. I have Babe Ruth's, but the main sets that I loved were these, the Goodwin Champion cards. And what I loved about these cards is that it would pick the champion from every year. And if you look at it, it's all the top athletes from that era, from Cap Anson to King Kelly to Buffalo Bill, and just it's history. And playing these cards of like a Buffalo Bill, I mean, it's just something you read about in school and you learn about it, and it brings you back. It puts me into another world, and that's really what I enjoy about it. It kind of takes me back into history. When I'm looking at my cards and I'm reading about these guys, I'm almost transported back into that era, and that's what's fascinating to me.
I really think there's something ingrained in us guys that are interested in history. And this, I've said for a long time that, history meets sports in a lot of cases, meets finances in a lot of cases. And that's really where cards converge. And I really do think they're going to last. I think you guys make great points. Now let me kind of switch gears a little bit, because a lot of people that are going to be watching this are interested in pre-war, or maybe they're not yet, and maybe they're starting to get there. What is kind of a good starting place for somebody who's looking to move that direction? Because to me, I've always thought, even though it's not pre-war, that 1952 look-and-see set that I have a few cards from, I know Ryan's picked up some recently.
Yeah.
Like, that set sort of seems like a good place as an entry point to move prior to those, late 50s and 60s stars that we all know. Is there another kind of set in that kind of time frame besides that look and see set that Topps put out that you guys think is kind of a starter for a lot of people?
So, are you talking about just non-sports or just in general? Because if you look at just the 33 Sports King set, it's very similar in essence. Now, there's not really non-sports figures in there. I mean, there's a few, but like you have a collage of different sports all coming together within there. And if people aren't familiar with it, so if you know your 33 Gaudis, the Gaudi company also produced those in 33. There's actually a Ruth and also a Cobb in that set as well, which is kind of interesting. At least there's a few different baseball players in there, but you could find everything from boxing to hockey, like it's wrestling, like it's really cool, and I think that's a good way to start like branching out to other sports. Now, from the non-sports side of things, if you're gonna start with Ogden's in like 1902. Again, there's 5,000 cards. There's multiple series. Like, it's super granular. Like, there's full-on books about Ogden cards, and I do want to purchase one. So that'll be another purchase in the future. They're actually tough to find. But that gets you kind of knowing some of the different historical figures in the early 1900s. And there's some pretty early cards too, like Winston Churchill. Some of his first cards are in that set. Then you have Edison in there. He had stuff in the 1800s, but still a pretty big name on that side of things. You have like Napoleon in there, but you have Houdini in there. Like, there's so many different names that you could really research within that set. And there's a lot of people that you won't know, obviously, especially being a foreign release, but they do have some Americans in there. It's really fun. So, like, if you're looking for non-sports, start with some of the Ogden stuff in the early 1900s. If you're looking for a hodgepodge of other sports beyond baseball, look at the 1933 Sports Kings.
I think that's a really good suggestion. The 33 Sports Kings, it has a lot of those recognizable names too. So maybe you're into golf. There are 3 golfers in there. There's a surfer in there, right? I think it's under swimming, but Duke Hanamoko is a surfer. Babe Zaharias, I think, has a card in there. So there are some good ones. Is there any you would add to that, Orlando?
No, I think that's pretty much one of the better ones there. I do like the 52, the Look and See, and that's got Queen Elizabeth, it's got Rembrandt, it's got a whole bunch of really good people in there too. So
yeah,
definitely.
I've got quite a few of those.
If you compare that 52 to the 52 Topps, boy, is that undervalued.
Well, and the 52 Look and Sees were done by the same commissioned by the same artist at the same time. So they have a very similar look to the 52 Topps. If you are interested in non-sport, that 52 Look and Sees, I mean, you can get an Abraham Lincoln in decent condition for, under $100. You get Albert Einstein. There's, a lot of really cool ones in there. So
if you really want to go back, I mean, you can get George Washington and Abraham Lincoln all the way back to the 1800s. I mean, 19th century cards there.
I remember at one point recently there was a long stretch where the only living person left in that set was Queen Elizabeth, and for a long time everyone else had passed. So I'm going to switch gears completely with you guys for a second. So something that I'm always fascinated with is the whole grading industry. And, when I first was a collector as a kid growing up in the 80s and the 90s, it was all about PSA. They were kind of first to the scene. They were the big one. Nobody went to SGC at the time. And then Beckett kind of got involved, and Beckett was kind of for some of the newer stuff was big. And then, like a lot of us, life happened for me, and I got a job and I got married and I had kids. And then when I came back into the card scene, it was like SGC was like a real competitor. And a lot of people now prefer SGC. And I know you both are on team SGC. Like, you guys seem to prefer SGC. You, a lot of your submissions are to SGC. Orlando, what happened? Or when did you kind of go, SGC is now my company? Was there like something that happened, or was it just a gradual progression? So why did you go there, and then why are they better?
Well, I have to tell you, I was a PSA guy forever. When I first started, I mean, I remember in 1992 at the Atlanta National, I remember that PSA was there trying to almost giving away to the dealers telling them, come on, we'll grade the cards for free. And nobody really wanted to do it. And I really didn't get into it until really, I'd say around 2000. I had all my cards, my mantle collection and my other cards that were, all my mantles were basically raw, you know, so I figured, let me go ahead and get them graded, and I put them on the registry. I got into the registry. I really wanted to put my cards on the registry. So I started grading a lot of my stuff, my good ones, and all the ones that were raw, I grade them with PSA to put them on the registry. But after a while, you know, since I'm really not one that's going to sell my stuff, I mean, I'll sell some, but very, very little. So I just like the SGC slabs. I like them for the vintage. I like the look of them. I think that SGC, in my opinion, is more consistent grader than PSA. You know, you see every day people sending in cards. They break them out, send them in, and they get different grades. I don't see that much for SGC. And you know, most of my cars are SGC, and I look at them, and I went to the CSG grading school that I told you guys. Now it's a different name, but whatever. In Sarasota, when they had that, they were hiring graders, so I was able to get in there and go through that. So I learned a lot about grading at that time. And when I really look at my SGC cards, I really feel that they're graded more accurately than my PSA cards, especially for the vintage. And that's just my opinion. And I also just like the look of it. I mean, now, if you were going to resell the cards, if you're going to be flipping the cards, probably better with PSA. But for my personal collection, I just like the SGC slab.
Let me follow up one thing with you, and then I want to have Ryan answer the same thing. So those original mantles that you had, that you said you graded in PSA, are they still in PSA holders, or did you switch them over? And are you willing to, or are you switching anything over to SGC?
No, all of my my entire mantle run is on the PSA registry, and they're all PSA graded, and most of them are the old PSAs. They don't even have the lighthouse thing on it. So it's the old one. But yeah, no, I'm not going to spend money switching. Most of my collection is not even graded. So I really rather spend money to buy more cards than to grade my cards. And the only reason I have graded cards, which I did grade a bunch with SGC, was more for my family, so I could document things. So when they are going to sell my cards, they know what they're worth. You know,
I think that's
really the main reason. But if not, I would keep them all raw. So I think all of my big cards, I've tried to get them graded.
I think that's a really smart idea, because it's much easier to comp a card in an SGC or a PSA holder with a grade to a novice than somebody who has raw cards not knowing what they've actually got. Now, Ryan, in addition to writing books and having 2 YouTube channels and being an engineer and data analyst, he also, you can do submissions through Ryan to SGC. So if you wanted to submit your cards in bulk or not in bulk or whatever, you can send them to Ryan. Ryan will prep them, and then Ryan will send them to SGC. So Ryan, tell us a little bit about that service that you do, if somebody was interested in that, but also tell us a little bit about this. You know, obviously you're associated with SGC, so you believe in them. Do you have anything to add to what Orlando said?
Yeah, so first, we're a group subber with SGC. Actually, Steven does the bulk of the work on the group subbing side of things. I just make some of the videos and showcase that and help bring in people on that side of things. But Steven actually is based out of Miami. He's moving back there this week, and we're also doing drop off in person now, so which is actually really cool. So you can see us at a show, and we can pick up cards and then drop them off directly at SGC, and then pick them up. And if we meet you guys at another show, we can also drop you off in person there. So there's no shipping between SGC or yourself, which is pretty cool flexibility-wise for either like dealers or people that want to get a decent amount graded. And we do have a discounted price on that side of things, but like, I agree 100% with the accuracy side of things. Now, I think there's a fair point. Like, with everything that's graded, it's always a personal opinion on it. So there's always going to be like a card or two you may disagree with. if you see it at a show or you get it back in a grading, like, oh, this is high or this is low. And it's across the board with all grading companies, but SGC has been the most accurate on it. And personally, I like their slab the best with the vintage. I like the black cutouts on the side. I think it just makes it pop, especially on the pre-war side of things. And SGC is known for pre-war cards. There's a lot of non-sports pre-war cards within SGC slabs. And on the baseball side of things, up until a few years ago, right, a lot of the pre-war side went directly to SGC, and that's why you see a lot of the older SGC labels with T206 cards. Very prevalent on that side of things, or even like 33 Gaudis. All the time you'll find it, but that's where they were originally sent to.
Were you ever a PSA guy like Orlando and then you just switched over time, or have you always been an SGC guy? Because I know historically most of what you've collected has always been pretty old stuff.
So originally, as funny as it is, my dad, where we got the hobby from, was very anti-grading. Thought it was like a big scam and never to get into it. But until I like really started traveling to all the card shows and different things and like buying and selling, I realized like kind of the importance of it. And I get the viewpoint of like people hating grading, but the thing is, people will always argue on the condition of a card. Oh, this card's near mint, but it has like a folded corner. It's not near mint. Well, I think it's near mint, so I'm gonna price it that way. Grading does standardize that across the board. If you send your card to the folded corner, you're not getting an 8, or you're not getting a 7, or you're not getting a 9. So it breaks out that side of things where people can kind of overgrade, but also at the same time, it does have the opportunity. If someone does undergrade their card or price it lower at a show, you can find it raw and then get it graded. And you can either like keep it in your collection with a higher grade or sell it to buy something that you personally want to have within your collection. So, you know, grading is needed from that side of things, but like in my opinion, the most important thing about grading is authenticity side of things, because people would scam on fake cards. Oh, this is a real Jordan card. Yeah, why isn't it graded? Well, and like always buy that type of card in a graded slab, or if someone's going to spend stupid money on a 51 or 52 mantle, make sure you buy it in a slab. Don't buy it raw.
Yeah, I think that's good advice too. But I'll also say this, when you go to a show, the price the price difference is so much less when you're buying raw than when you're buying graded. For largely what you're saying is there's a risk of, is it trimmed? Is it authentic? What is there color added? What's going on here? So I understand that allure, and I also understand wanting to touch and feel the cards. But I think as soon as you get to a certain price point, I think that you really got to be careful.
Yeah, like, I mean, let's just say they had a 1960 mantle that looks like near mint. Would you buy that card raw at a show for a few $1,000s, or would you rather buy it already in a slab that says it's a what, like a 6, 7, or an 8? Like, and there's a huge price difference between you're jumping from a 6 and a 7 or a 7 and an 8. So, like, with expensive cards, it kind of makes sense to get those graded on that side of things. And look, I love touching cards raw. Like, it's its own experience, but at the same time, from the hobby standpoint, there's so many people that expect to have a card with a specific grade, and that's how they collect. And if you do sell cards, which I think everyone does buy, sell, and trade cards, it kind of has to be it with where the hobby is at today.
If you were to give one piece of advice, like what's the most important way to spot a fake card? Is it, because I know you have the black light test that I've seen you do,
I
that
feel the card, because
say,
most of the fakes, they do not feel real at all. Like, you'll pull it out of a top loader, you just feel the texture on it, and you're like, that's wrong. Like, what I'd recommend if people get into vintage cards is first kind of like study like how thick a card is, like what the texture is on the card, and like 2-second test. You can literally take a vintage card and sniff it, and you should be able to smell the old cardboard on that side of things. And that's just like classic for baseball, football, and hockey cards. There is going to be differences when you have overseas issues, when you have non-sports issues. But just general advice on like standard stuff you find at card shows, just smell the card. It will smell old. And most of the time, you will know it's real because of that.
yeah, I think the smell thing, somebody once described it to me as it smells like an old library book. And that really is. It's like going to your grandma's house, and what would a book smell like? That's really what a legit card smells like.
And also, the feel of the card. If you felt enough cards and you feel it, you'll know that the fake sometimes feels a little bit glossy or a little bit different. You could really tell, especially if you have one right next to each other. So I always do the same thing. I recommend what Ryan said. Just bring a card. If you're looking for 53 cards, bring a 53 common. So you have that with you to compare. And I've noticed now that a lot of the raw cards are really getting more expensive. I think dealers are really kind of catching up and looking at a raw card, and a lot of them are kind of overgrading their raw cards. So you got to be careful there too.
And that's where like grading is needed on that side of things. I mean, if you have a crease across the face, that card's a 1.5. That's not a near mint copy, which some dealers will price the card out to be. And you're like, no, I'm not going to pay you that price for the card.
Right.
But there's obviously some really good dealers. There's some bad dealers. Like that's just across the board, right? You're not going to have everything perfect, and not even just dealers like setting up a show. You have people that walk around, they go to the dealers' tables and do the same exact thing. Like, I want $500 for this card, and it has fully rounded corners and it's crumpled up. You're like, I will not pay you that much for that card.
Yeah, and I think that even some of the good dealers, they might buy a lot or they might buy a collection that might have some stuff in it that isn't trustworthy. So it's not even necessarily the dealer sometimes, is it's where the cards were, where they came from.
I 100% agree with that. Just add on a little bit. It's like when I went over to the United Kingdom, it's very common over there for people to like use a black Sharpie or whatever else and touch up the edges of Ogden cards. And like when you're buying a ton of Ogdens or you buy collections over there, like you are going to find a lot of them that are altered. That's just how they do the cards over there, and they don't even grade overseas. So it's like a fully different culture. Like that's normally accepted over on that side of things. In comparison to the U.S., people would freak out, and I would too, right? Like 71 tops. If someone has a Sharpie in black border, like a Nolan Ryan in that set or a Thurman Munson, people would be rightly pissed. But like where you purchase your cards does matter, but you got to remember also the culture side of things. If you go overseas, it is way different than it is in U.S. collecting base.
And it's so much easier to buy stuff overseas now. That is something we all need to be aware of because of the eBays and the auction houses for sure. Now we're getting low on time. So I want to kind of wrap this up with one last thing. And again, I super appreciate you guys being here.
Craig, I
Again,
want to say one thing real quick.
Yeah.
It was so funny watching Ryan pick out the cards with tweezers over there. I'm thinking he's going to get those cards.
You know what the funny thing is too? Dealers will just throw the cards off, and I'm like, oh, there goes down another grade.
And that's like a thing. Like that's how they do it, right? With tweezers, like they have them around and stuff, right?
That's the whole market over there. Everyone has tweezers, whether at their own houses, because I did look at 2 collections, and also at the card show. Like it's all albums. You pull out the card with tweezers, and then you go to the book, and that's how you price it.
Again, anybody interested in learning about older stuff, Ryan's old card show videos, and that one wasn't that long ago, where he was overseas and he was pulling cards out with tweezers. But yeah, I mean, you'll learn a lot of stuff like that just from watching his channel. So what I was going to ask you guys, this is our last wrap up because we are low on time. We all want a crystal ball. We all want a time machine. We all want to know, what's going to happen before it happens. But what's one area, if you were to pick right now, if you were to kind of look forward 3-4 years of what you think is sort of a low hanging fruit of what you see as an area of growth that could rise in value? If we could go back 4 years, I'd say Jackie Robinson cards, right? They went crazy, but what would be something that if you were to kind of look forward, just a few years that you think, I think this is undervalued and I think this is set to take off? And Orlando, why don't you go first?
Okay.
We got about a minute each.
Okay, I think a lot of the cards that are made in other countries, the Venezuelan cards, I think those are hot. Those are very tough to find. I think the Cuban cards, a lot of cards that are made in even Australia. I think a lot of those cards are very undervalued. A lot of the music cards that Ryan's looking for, those are definitely undervalued. I think a lot of culture cards, older culture cards, and older, people like Einstein and stuff like that, and Houdini. I think those type of cards really are going to become more popular.
Ryan, 30 seconds. What would you say?
Historical figures with it's music or just individuals. I mean, there's no reason why even like in 1969 Neil Armstrong is cheaper than Reggie Jackson.
Fair point. Hey guys, I super appreciate it. I really, really enjoyed getting to know you guys a little bit, talk to you guys a little bit. You guys have been an inspiration for me and my channel, and being able to do this was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for joining me. everybody out there for your comments, for your participation, for showing up. Really appreciate it. And hey, check out these guys' channels. They're awesome.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Greg.
All right, guys. Thanks. Hey, safe travels, Ryan.
I'll do.
Yeah.
Hopefully, the fight is good tonight.
All right. See you guys.
Take care.